Chapter 1, Monday, June 25th at 10 o'clock a.m. Jax Reed steeled himself as the heavy metal door swung open. His skin crawled with anxiety. In an attempt to control his emotions, he shook his hands with vigor before walking through the last door leading to a room he'd visited twice in the last few months. Jax really hoped today was the last time he had to do this. He'd gotten used to seeing Officer Melville, a man with a stature that defied his age. Jax was 6'1" himself and had estimated the older prison guard to be at least 6'5". 2 months ago, on Jax's first visit, Melville had revealed he was approaching retirement. He'd also admitted to Jax that the prisoner he monitored had to be the scariest person he'd ever met. Melville had worked 20 years as a prison guard and seen all kinds of thugs and criminals. The old guard was missing in action today, but his words reverberated in Jax's mind as the soles of his shoes tapped across the concrete floor. Jeffrey Maddox is a special kind of evil. When Jax stepped inside the room, his eyes fell on the man who'd been his source of study for the past 8 months. He was really ready to complete this book, but his editor insisted they needed more from Maddox's early life. Besides, Jax's whole reason for pursuing the project was to show the world the making of a serial killer.
Mr. Reed, how good to see you again.
Maddox smiled at him. Jax sat down. The man's smile appeared as an oddity against his pale face, and icy blue eyes that showed no emotion. His teeth were super white and straight. The man's blonde tresses were immaculate, except for a few strands hanging over his eye. And even those looked well-placed. Charming, handsome, and deadly. Too bad the women this man killed couldn't see past his good looks. Or maybe there were some red flags that they ignored. The type of women Maddox sought were single, smart, with just enough desperation to find Mr. Right that made them a target. Jax made note of the man's hands, which were bound in chains. He knew Maddox's ankles were shackled as well underneath the table. An officer stood behind Maddox in the corner, his hands at his side not far from his weapon. The officer who walked in with Jax gave a subtle head nod to his colleague and then proceeded to close the door. Jax glimpsed the man's head outside the small window, standing guard. Despite the 2 guards in chains, he still felt uncomfortable around this man. He attempted a smile that felt foreign on his face, like his mind was warning him to be aware. Thanks for seeing me again, Mr. Maddox. I have a few more questions for you to round out the first part of the book.
Oh, is that so? I would think the last part of the book is more interesting.
Ignoring Maddox's statement, he asked, "Do you mind if I record you? It's easier to transcribe later."
Whatever you need to do, Mr. Reed.
Thank you. He pulled his handheld recorder out of his pocket, pressed the button, and began recording. Jax made an effort not to squirm. On his first visit, he couldn't seem to remain still, and Maddox picked up on his obvious discomfort. Before beginning, he took one more glance at the guard. "We want the readers to get to know you. Can you tell us a bit about your life as a child?"
Like what? If I killed small animals?
Maddox chuckled as if he'd told the best joke. "Did you?" Maddox's laughter grew louder. The guard behind him yelled, "Cut it out, Maddox." Maddox didn't even look at the guard. Instead, he stared at Jax, his face quite amused.
Of course. I was a little boy who grew up near the woods. Lots of animals to entertain me.
"You were raised by your mother."
Just like you.
Jax froze for a second. A sudden burst of churning rocked his stomach. Maddox was turning this interview back on him. He needed to be careful. The man liked to control the conversation, and he couldn't let him do that. He attempted to steer Maddox toward talking more about his own childhood. "Did you know your father?"
I didn't. Well, not when I was a young boy. I met him later in life.
"Do you know why he and your mother split?" Maddox stared blankly at the wall behind Jack's. Kind of unnerved him, but once again he kept his own body still, watching Maddox's every move. At the point when the awkward silence became uncomfortable, Maddox said,
My mother messed with a married man. She shouldn't have done that.
Again, something fluttered in Jack's stomach. Was Maddox playing games with him? Suddenly, Maddox focused on him.
You and I have a lot in common.
Really? How so? Maddox smiled.
I became interested in this famous person writing about me. Your first book did really well. What a surprise to learn that your sister is Jo Reed Powell, the one who arrested me. Your other sister wasn't too kind in the courtroom either, Asia Reed. You Reeds are quite a force to be reckoned with.
The smile on Maddox's face disappeared like someone had wiped it away. Jo had warned him about this, that Maddox would not be pleased with Jack's connection to the two people who made sure to put him away. Before Jax could respond, Maddox spoke up. An eerie smile found its way back on his face.
But that's not what we're talking about today, Mr. Reed. You see me as an opportunity to bring you more fame and money, so you're willing to talk to me.
Jax protested. It's neither. I'm sharing your story. Maddox leaned forward.
My horrible story. You and your readers want to think I have mommy issues, but I don't think that's what's important here.
It was well documented that Maddox's victims resembled his mother. Jax frowned. What do you want people to know about you? Maddox grinned, showing all of his pretty straight white teeth.
That there's more to my story, more than they will ever know.
Jax tensed again. Jo had hinted to him a while ago that she always felt Maddox had more victims than the three he was charged. Are you saying you had other victims? Don't you think you should let those families know what happened to their loved ones? Maddox stared off again as if he was ignoring Jax. Jax glanced over at the guard, who was staring at Maddox as though he wanted to punch him. Stand in line, man. Jax started to believe he'd wasted his time coming here today. Maddox wasn't going to reveal anything. He needed to go with what he had, and his editor just needed to be content. Maddox spoke softly, his voice so low, Jax wasn't sure he heard him speak. He asked, "Did you say something?" Maddox locked his eyes on him again.
I believe you have mommy issues too. Maybe that's why you came to see me. You want me to tell you about mine. Maddox cocked his head to the side, maybe to make you feel better about your issues.
Jax clenched his fist. He took a deep breath before he addressed Maddox. I understand that you don't want to cooperate. Just know you had an opportunity to tell your side of the story. This book will be published with or without your input. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay here. With that statement, Jax clicked off the recorder and stood. Maddox glared at him. He yelled, spit flying out of his mouth.
You will never have the full story.
The guard in the corner walked up close. He barked, "Calm down, Maddox." Maddox side-eyed the guard before looking back at Jax. Jax stared down at the man, and for once was glad for the advantage in view. Is there something you want to add? That crazy smile was back. The mood swings this man had were truly astonishing.
I have information that could change the story.
Jax glanced over at the guard. How much longer do we have? The guard grimaced and looked at his watch. Your visit still has 20 more minutes. Jax sat down again. What is this information?
I'm willing to let the world in on my secrets, Mr. Reed.
This man made no sense. Then Jax started to see what Maddox was doing. You want something in return for sharing. Maybe. Jax shook his head. There's nothing I can do. What you share could help. Relieve your conscience. Not that this man had one.
They won't find her without me.
Her. Jax felt sweat forming on his forehead. So, there is another woman. Maddox grinned. This man was playing games. Why? Was he bored with his 3 consecutive life terms? He clearly wasn't going anywhere. Jack stood again. Sorry, I need to go. I think we're done.
You'll be back. You're a reporter, and a reporter always gets their story.
Jax didn't sprint out of the room, but he moved pretty fast. By the time he'd stepped outside, he gladly breathed the hot, humid summer air. He'd take the scorching 90-degree weather over the cold evil in that building. He rubbed his head, still trying to figure out what Maddox's game was all about. Was Maddox for real? Did he really have another victim? And why on earth did it feel like Maddox had dug into Jax's relationship with his mother? The man had purposely shared some disturbing similarities, one being that Maddox, like Jax, was born from an affair. The Reed family had accepted Jax as one of their own, but he'd often thought about the fact he was a half-sibling to his 3 sisters and brother. Jax didn't have mommy issues. Despite her faults, he loved Evelyn Underwood. She'd been the best mother she could be. At least he liked to think of her that way, despite leaving him with a lot of questions after her death.
Jax.
The familiarity of the voice startled him out of his jumbled thoughts and emotions. He turned in the direction a woman's voice. A woman from his past walked up to him, concern on her face. Jax's breath hitched in his chest as Ebony Hampton approached him. Ebony Hampton, the same woman who'd broken his heart 15 years ago.